You've said that radio was one of the things that drew you into journalism. What do you love about radio?
Well, let me say first of all, what a great pleasure it is for me to be here tonight. After writing these letters, signing them, for 30 years. No, I don't write them actually. That was one of the deals with George. George said, Lloyd, I'll write them, you sign them. And I said, well, George, can I read them first? Oh, all right, but John, try not to change anything. But you saw there, when you heard George's voice, he was, in my humble opinion, the best farm communicator this country has ever seen. And the reason was, and this was the man I knew, the reason was he knew how to reach out. He knew how to present a problem, bring it to people's attention, and then ask questions about it, and get people involved. And that's the mark of a good communicator, doing exactly what George Atkins did for years.
How did you meet him? What were your first impressions?
I was an announcer for George on his radio broadcast in Toronto, and I remember him telling me about this project called at first the Developing Farm Radio Network. And he said, you know, I'm in touch with these guys in Africa. I went over there and they were telling me about their problems with seeding and irrigation and animal handling and all this kind of thing. And he said, I really think we can help out here. And George he had a universal approach to the world. He wanted to help people everywhere because he knew that agriculture was so important to all of us. And that's the case still today. And goodness knows in Africa, they need help right now because of climate change. But George and I talked a lot about the problems in Africa, the problems in Canada, and he said, what I'm gonna do is bundle scripts together, put tapes in them, and send them off. So it was very fundamental at the beginning. That's all he was doing. And then it grew into this wonderful project that we have now.
If George were still with us, and knowing that his family is here tonight, what stories would you reminisce about if he was here tonight?
Oh, my goodness, I see him in so many of these people here tonight. Louise, the youngest, and all the others. I met them when I came in tonight. I think most of all, I would talk about George being the kind of gregarious, open, friendly man he was. He was of the world. He loved people. And that was apparent every time he walked into a radio studio. He'd say, Lloyd, how are you? And he knew too that I liked farm smells because I grew up close to farm smells. I lived on the last house of the last street before the farm fields in Stratford, Ontario, before it became an international festival city. And so I went to school with a lot of farm kids. And I knew about the issues and some of the problems that we would talk with them about it all the time. But George he hooked right into people. That's what he was, and I know from talking to his family that he was the same way at home. He talked to them about the issues of the day, the things that mattered to him.
It's still though, you must have been deluged over the years with requests from various charities and organizations to front them or help them. Why did you stick with farm radio for 30 years?
Well, because I love George for one thing. I considered him a very good friend right from the beginning. When I was asked to do this. But the other thing is, you know, when you've had a successful life, and I've certainly had a successful life, you want to be able to give back. And I think that's really, really important in life. And I would not have continued doing this if it hadn't been working. But every so often, Kevin will say to me, Lloyd, you know, we're getting good response on that letter. So would you do another one? So I just kept doing them and doing them and doing them. And that's the way it's been going for years and years. And as long as we can have an effect, as long as we can raise the money we need to raise for this very, very worthwhile project about feeding people, about feeding the world, this very important project, as long as I can have some kind of impact, I'll keep doing it.
I mentioned in my introduction to you about trust and the importance of trust. And it came up when we were hearing from the staff from Africa about how we're asking farmers to, in some cases, change the way they've been doing things for generations. They have to trust that the information that farm radio is giving them is accurate. You're all about trust and building trust with the audience. How do you build it, and how do you maintain it, more importantly?
Oh, it takes time. People have to get used to you. You have to prove yourself to people. It doesn't come overnight, believe me. It takes a while. But gradually, they begin to think that this person they're listening to, this person who is coming into their living rooms through radio or television, is authentic. There is a person there. They can reach out and touch that person. That is the beginning of the building of trust. And then you carry that forward. But when you are trusted, you don't do anything to deny the audience the privilege of thinking they trust you, because that freezes the bond. That makes it happen, and that carries you forward. And nowadays, as we all know, with all of the misinformation spreading over the internet, trust becomes more important than ever. And we have to know our sources, know where information comes from. Don't just take it and read it and call somebody and say, hey, did you see such and such today? Don't do that. Know where it comes from. Know your sources.
I do want to ask you about some of the stories that you reflect on now, stories that you may have done a half a century ago. But I also want to ask you, arm wrestling with Peter Mansbridge, who wins?
I say one fall each. No, Peter and I have a good relationship, and we've been competitors, and I was competitors with others before Peter came along, so I'm used to it. And you develop a kind of a camaraderie after a time, because his problems are your problems. You're dealing with the same kind of issues every day.
We heard about some of the real impacts that farm radio have on the lives of families and communities in Africa. What are some of the stories that you recall now, reflecting back, that had an impact either on the audience or you yourself personally?
Well, personally, I mentioned this in the book, not to publicize the book.
Which, is it available at the back, Lloyd?
I believe it is, actually. But it's been out for many years. It was published in 2012, and it's just really the story of my personal journey. But in there, I say that the one that had the greatest impact on me was the massacre in Montreal of the women at École Polytechnique in 1989. And that hit me personally, because I'm the father of 4 daughters, and they were just in their teens at the time. And to have to go on the air, and we were breaking in and out during the course of the evening and telling that story, I got angry. I was physically trying to hold myself back. I was so angry that this was happening in Canada. That one certainly had an impact on me. The others, and there are many of them, you can talk about, everybody remembers, not everybody here I should say, I do, remember the Kennedy assassination, and the bookend of that, which was really 9/11, which in the view of most correspondents who covered both stories, is the bigger story because of the massive impact it had. Not just 3,000 lives, but the impact on all of our lives every day, going through an airport, dealing with security systems, security issues. That and Kennedy are the bookends of those tragedies. But there were also, in my view, some great moments covering this country as it grew up in Centennial Year. I was at the CBC. It was my best ever overall assignment. From one end of the country to the other, up north, down east, spending several weeks in Montreal during Expo. I got to love this place. It's part of what I am. And I feel that I know its idiosyncrasies. I know something about its regional differences. And you get to know that. In fact, journalism, I've often said, teaches you about how the world works. In this case, I learned about how our country works. And I'm certainly the better for it.
Would you have liked to have been around for Donald Trump?
No, right. That's easy. I'm always around, I always like being around for a good news story. But I think in this case, I'd left. He didn't come along until long after I'd left the chair. I've been out of the chair 8 years now. And I just feel that I'll tell you what it is that bothers me about what's happening right now in respect of that question. and that is that the civil discourse we have with politics in this country, fortunately, hasn't descended into the pit of what's happening in the U.S., where they call he calls, little Marco and stupid Steve and all this kind of stuff, That shouldn't be coming from the leader of the free world, in my view.
I have one last request or question. For the delight of the Farm Radio International crowd gathered here tonight, would you please sign off with your iconic CTV National News sign-off?
The date today is June 8th, right?
Correct.
And that's the kind of day it's been on this Saturday, June the 8th. Good night.